Welcome back, students. In this lecture, I'm going to go very quickly through the process of setting up a QField project. And then for the rest of the lectures in this course, we'll go through and flesh out the details and talk about how we can set up some additional functionality. But the very basics we're going to go through quickly, just to give you kind of the 50,000-foot overview of the process. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some new tables in a PostGIS database. So I'm going to go to my DB Manager, and if you've taken my course on Enterprise GIS, you know that we set up an instance of a PostGIS database on a hosting platform called AccuGIS, and I'm going to use that because we have that currently available. And in fact, if you take that course, then you know the credentials for that database, and you can actually create some layers yourself and test out the process. Having this database hosted on AccuGIS means that it's accessible from anywhere in the world that has an internet connection, and that means that we can use it on QField to collect data. So I'm just going to take a quick look in our public schema. You'll see that we had some tables here that were created in that Enterprise GIS course. We're going to create some new tables. We're going to create just a generic point, a generic line, and a generic polygon. And these are just going to have things like a label, description, the ability to take a picture, and some things like that. Just some really basic stuff, but worthwhile stuff in that it will allow us to get out there and start collecting data in real time. So with my DB Manager open, I'm going to go to Table and Create Table. And we're going to create it in the public schema. The name is just going to be Gen Point, and we'll add a field, and the first field automatically comes up with a serial data type. That's that auto incrementing ID, and that's generally a good idea. However, in the context of mobile platforms, we're going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to call this field UUID, and we're going to make it a string with a length up to 255 characters. And that's going to be our primary key. You'll see it shows up here automatically because it's the first field. Now let's add another field. Let's just call it label. And this will be a string, but I'm going to change it to have a maximum length of 50. And I'm going to allow this also to be null. And this is the label that will be displayed in both our QGIS project and, of course, in QField. And I'll add another field, description. And this one I'm going to make a text field. That's unlimited length, and I'll allow that also to be null. And I'm going to add a field called photo. That's also going to be a string with a maximum length of 255. And that will be null. And see, we'll have date created, and that's going to be a timestamp. And I'm not going to allow that to be null because that's going to be created automatically for us. And then the type of geometry that we want to create is point. The spatial reference ID 4326, that's just that long WGS84. I'm going to create a spatial index for this, and then I'll click Create, and there we have a new table. Now, one nice thing about this database manager is that when you create a new table like that, it doesn't go back and remove all these fields. So I can just change the name of a table to generic line and change the geometry type to a multi-line string. And I'll create that, and then I'll also create one for polygons. So these all have the exact same fields. The only thing that's going to be different is the geometry field is going to be different. So we'll change the geometry type to multi-polygon, and we'll create that. And now if we look in our public schema, you'll see that we have gen line, gen point, and gen poly. So those are the three fields that we're going to use. I'm going to right click on each of them and add them to the canvas. And I'm also going to add a background layer. Let's just keep it simple, and so we'll add an OpenStreetMap as a background layer. And then I'm going to change the symbology really quickly. So let's change this point symbology to just a red dot. We'll change the line symbology to a red line, and I'll make it a little bit wider. Let's make it 1 millimeter wide. And the polygon will do a hash mark, but the border will make a red line. Now, before I get too far, I'm going to save this project. And I'm going to save that project in my Udemy courses QField directory. And we'll just call it Project QField Quickstart. And I'm going to change this so it doesn't save it as a QGZ, which is a zipped version of the project, but as a QGS project, which is the unzipped version. So we'll save that before I forget. And then a couple other things that we're going to need to do. And let's start with the gen point. And that is that we're going to set the label to a single label. The value will be the value of the label field. And for the text, let's change it to bold text of size 13 with a white buffer around it. And then I also want to change some things in the form for this gen point. And so I'm going to change this from auto-generate to drag and drop designer. For the UUID, I'm going to make it not editable. And the default value is going to use the function UUID and then parentheses, and that's a function that generates a UUID value, just like is shown in this preview. And so this way, anytime we create a feature for this feature class, it's going to automatically have this UUID value, and we won't be able to change it because it's not editable. And then we'll come over here and click label. And the label, we're just going to leave as it is. It's a text edit widget. It's editable, no default. Description we'll leave exactly the way it is, except for, remember, description is unlimited. So we're going to make that multi-line text. And then for photo, we're going to change the widget type to attachment. And I'm going to click relative paths. And then date created, we see the widget type for this is automatically a date time widget. It's fine. We can change a few things about how it's displayed. But the main thing that I want to change for here is a default value. I'm going to use the QGIS function now, and that just returns the current date and time. And I'm also going to make this one not editable. So that's also going to be created automatically. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my other two fields. I'll click OK, and then double click on Gen Poly. Let's say UUID is not editable. The default is UUID. Description is going to be multi-line. Photo is going to have a widget type of attachment that's going to allow us to take a photo and collect the photo file name in QField. And then date created also is going to be non-editable with a default value of now. And I'm also going to change the label. And we'll do the same thing for a line, which I won't bore you with watching me go through all these steps for a third time. Okay, so we've set up a simple project in QGIS. We've named it QField Quickstart. I'm going to go ahead and save this before I forget. And we've changed some properties in QGIS that affect how the property is displayed and the form for entering attribute data and things like that. Now I want to quick double check in some of my project properties just to see, let's see, under data sources, shows that all these fields are identifiable, that all these tables are identifiable and searchable. None of them are read-only, so that's good. We can edit all of them. We'll leave that the way it is. For the coordinate reference system, we'll choose WGS84. And one thing that's really important is that here under General that we have Save Paths set to relative. So that's all good. I'm going to hit Save again. And then I'm going to go to Plugins. I'm going to use the QField Sync plugin and select Package for QField. And it gives me a chance to change the export directory, but I'm just going to leave it as the default. So it's in my user's home directory in a directory called QField and a subdirectory of export. And it says some layers in this project have not yet been configured. So I'm going to click configure project now, and it lets me change the action for each layer. And we're going to keep things simple to begin with, and we're not going to do offline editing. I'm going to click no action. Now, if these were file-based layers instead of PostGIS layers, there'd be a couple different options available for moving the data into the project in QField. But since we're working with PostGIS, we don't have to worry about that because we're just going to interact directly with the database. And this is a great option if you're going to be collecting data in a connected environment. So I'll click OK, and then I'll click Create, and we'll let it spin for a little bit. And there we have it. Finish creating the project in this location, and then it says please copy this folder to your QField device. So how are we going to do that? Well, you can connect your Android device to your computer with a cable and copy it over manually. That's certainly an option that you should be aware of, and you may want to do it. What I find the easiest, though, is I will email myself a copy of the folder, and then I'll open that email on my device and save that project. So I'm going to click Gmail and Compose, and I'm going to email this to myself. The project, the subject, I just put Quickstart, and then I'm going to attach the project file, which again was in my home directory. So I'm going to come down here to users, then my username, QField, export, and we have a few in here. The one we're looking for is QField Quickstart. So let's open that. And then we have this QGS file. That's our project file. That's all we need. So I'm going to open that as an attachment in the email, and I'll send it. And then everything else is going to happen on the mobile device. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do on my device is I'm going to go open the email that I just sent, subject of Quickstart. Down here at the bottom is my attachment. I'll click this button and download. And this may work a little bit different on your device depending on the application that you're using to check your email and stuff like that, but you should have a download option to download attachments. And again, it may be a little bit different on other Android devices or other versions of Android. So you may have to search a little bit on your device. But on my device, if I open QField, and then this black button at the upper left will open a panel, and the cog opens the settings menu, and I'll click Open Project. And then I'm going to click Internal Storage and go to Downloads, and right there, second from the bottom, is our QField Quickstart QField project. So I'm going to click that, and it's going to open up. You'll notice that the symbology is the same, exactly as we created it in QGIS. This little gray button to the right of the side panel turns on GPS, and it may ask you, if you haven't used QField on your device before, for permission to use location settings, and you should probably just say yes. And right there, it's found my location. I'm in Mexico City, so that's where it has. I can zoom in using my fingers, just like any other mapping application on an Android device. And there I am. I'm going to walk outside and start collecting some data. I apologize in advance for the quality of the audio, but I am out and about in Mexico City, and it's 25 million people, so it's just naturally noisy. But this is a class about mobile applications, so we have to be mobile. And this is one of the consequences. Now, to collect a position, and for this video I'm just going to collect points because we want it to be relatively short. This lecture is already fairly long. We've got to cover a lot of stuff in one lecture. To start digitizing, we need to move into digitizing mode. And we do that by clicking the little pencil that indicates editing at the top of this sidebar. So I'm going to click that right now. And when I do, it says you are now in digitize mode. Then I have to select the feature class that I want to digitize. And I'm going to click Gen Point. And as soon as I do that, I'll see that down at the bottom, the lower right, there's a yellow circle with a plus on it. As soon as I hit that, it's going to collect point. Now, I'm going to close this sidebar by clicking the 3 bars at the upper left of it. And so now we can see the center of the screen when you're in digitizing mode is a circle and a cross. And the point that's going to get collected is going to be the point that's at the center of that cross. And so I can move this now. For instance, I can move it over to here, which I happen to know is the entrance to Los Pinos, which used to be the residence of the president of Mexico. It's on the corner of Chapultepec Park. But the current president is kind of a leftist, and he thought that was too much, so he doesn't live there. And now it's open to the public as a museum. As soon as I click this plus sign, I'm going to get this edit field, and I can add a label. So I'm just going to say for the label, Los Pinos. I'm not going to add anything for the description, but I'm going to take a photo, and if I click this green circle to the right, it takes a photo. That green circle turns into a save button, and if I click that save button, then I have a photo attached to this point. And then I'll come up here to the very top of the edit form and click the check button. We've added a feature to Los Pinos, and we see we have a label now because we set up the label in QGIS and the red dot. Now, if I want to get a location of exactly where I'm at, this black circle in the upper left, that looks kind of like the Activate GPS button, will automatically, if I press that, like I just did, it automatically attaches the center point and the cross to my current location. My current location is that little red dot there. So when this is activated, it doesn't matter where I move, the screen that's going to stay connected. And so with that activated, I'm certain that when I add a point, it's going to add the point at the location where I am. So we have 2 possibilities. We can move those crosshairs to another place, and that's handy if you want to collect a point that's like across the street from where you are, or maybe it's a point of a nest and you don't want to get so close that you disturb the bird or something like that. Or you can have it in the mode where the crosshairs is always connected to your current location. And so I'm going to add my label right now to be Metro Constituyentes, because I'm actually standing on top of the metro station. And sure, I'll take a photo really quick. There we go. I'll hit save, and I have the photo just like that. And I'll come up here and hit this check button again, and there I have another point added. So very simple. That's about all the time we have left. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next lecture.